Good day. Today we'll be looking at a small application built using JAVAFX and POSTGRESQL as the database. Um, our application is a small project management system that allows the user to create new projects, assign tasks to those projects, and assign users to those tasks. The user can also update the status of each project and the status of each task as well. The user is also allowed to see the amount of tasks that have been completed, or I should say the amount of projects that have been completed, the ones that are in progress, and the ones that are have not been started as yet or ignored. Secondly, they will be able to see it per project, I should say, used by looking at these charts. We'll go into the charts in a second. So we have 4 tabs here. We have listing of tasks, we have listing of users. As you can see, we have each user as a tile. Each tile has an edit button that allows us to edit the user. So the edit will essentially carry us to a page. We'll look into that when we get there. So for the sake of this, we'll start by adding a new user. So let's go with new user. We're going to give them a name. Let's say she's Grace. And date of birth is 20, I should say 1978. And gfelix@gmail.com. Hit create. So we just created a user. So let's return. So now that we're back here, go to listing of users, and we can see that we just created a new user called Grace Felix. Okay, so say we wanted to delete that same user, so let's come back here, then edit. So now we have the delete button that's available to us, and we have the update button. So let's say we wanted to change the last name. Let's say the name becomes Sonar. Okay, update. User profile is updated. You can check this here, and we see Grace Sonar. Now let's say we wanted to delete this. So we just hit the delete button, and we will see that this user has been removed from the listing of users. So once we have a user, we can essentially go on to creating tasks. So let's create a new task. So from the task, we can choose the different projects that are available to us, as well as the different users that are available in the system. So for instance, let's go to wireframing, and we'll go with Mark Phillips. We'll say the task is creating wireframes. Wireframes for 3D models. Give him a start date, so we say he starts then and he ends on the 25th. And we say the status, we can say whether they've already started it, if it's not if the task has not been started, or if it's been completed already. So we'll just say that it's in progress for the time being. So create, task info created. So return, and now we'll be able to see. Let's search, more or less will be at the bottom. Mark Phillips creating wireframes for 3D models, and it's set as in progress. Okay. And let's go over to, we can edit it, and we can change the status to, let's say it's completed. We can, let's say it's completed. Let's update it. And so now the list will show created wireframes for 3D models by Mark Phillips is completed. Let's try and delete this. And now the task is no longer with us. Alright, so another thing we can look at is doing with new projects. Let's create a new project. Call this project building a task manager. Manages tasks. Give it a start date. And we'll say that we'll leave it as ignored for the time being. Let's create a project. Set back. Building a task. Well, building a task management system. It's cut out because it's a really long name. Okay, so let's go down here. We can edit this task. Actually, a good thing to show is so we're going to create a new task using that same download that we just created. So building a task manager. We're going to assign Carl Hooper, design front end. Let's say it's in progress. So it's created. But now let's say that we wanted to squash this project. So we wanted to delete it. So we have the task here, right? And we know that it's assigned to building a task management system. But what if we just want to squash it? So we could end up deleting this. But when we delete this, what would that task point to? It won't have anything to point to. So when we delete this, what ends up happening is that not only the project is deleted, but the task as well will be removed from the system. Or any task related to that project is removed from the system. Right. So the final thing we look at is these two charts. So we have this pie chart here which shows us the state of all the projects in the system. So we can see all the projects that have been ignored, the set that have been completed, and the ones that are currently in progress. We have our legend and we can see that they're pointing towards their corresponding values. Here we have a bar chart that shows us the progress, the task progression per project. So here for instance we have an audit logging project going on here, and we can see it has 1 ignored, 3 in progress, and 1 completed. Yeah. Okay. So let's just take a look at the back end of this code, of this application. So let's open up NetBeans. Okay, great. So everything is run through app, as we know. We load from home, and everything just pops up as we press on the run button. Right. So let's just take a look at this side, on this side here. So we can see that we have a couple packages here. We have an NDA package, a DAO package, a TTO package, controllers package, and in our other sources we have all our FXML files, which have all been constructed using Scene Builder. So if I say, for instance, I wanted to look at what home looks like in Scene Builder, I can just double tap and it will bring up Scene Builder for me. So you can see all the different items that are on that scene essentially. Okay, and you can configure it however you wish to. Alright, so in our DAO we have all of our models. So these are concerned with any sort of CRUD functionality. So we have our strings here that are our SQL queries. And so we have our insert, we have our update, delete, view all, view one, and so on. We have our insert statements here. We'll be using SQL2o as our connection library. Works really good. So we would set our SQL2o variable here at the starting, and we will be using it throughout the entire throughout every function that we have here, or every method that we have here, for keeping with object-oriented terminologies. So let's take a look at this insert statement. So we have our try, we open up the connection, and we start to do this create query method, which calls on this same insert statement, this insert query here, And if you look inside of the insert statement, we have in our values bracket these different, I should say, parameters. So yeah, first name, surname, DOB, and email. And so we would even essentially add them all to our packet. To the query, because the query needs to find, if it has any parameters, needs to know what these parameters are named and what it should pass as these parameters. So in this case, the parameter's name is first name, and it's going to pass first name. This first name, however, comes from whatever is inserted inside of this function as an argument. The same trend continues on for all of the different queries, except for the views. So for the view user, we are using ArrayList and storing everything in them. So, we have the DTOs, the user DTOs, which essentially are the listing of all the getters and setters for the user model. So let's just open up the user's DTO. We can see that we have our different getters and our different setters. Good. So essentially, by saying ArrayList uses DTO, we're making the ArrayList have a structure that is similar to a user DTO, which means you can now call in any sort of functions related to user DTO, which would be the getters and setters. And yeah, okay. So we'll be using a table object to store all of the data for the views. I found this to be really simple a simple method to implement, and it worked really well in order to bring back data exactly how I wanted it to come back. Okay. So for each table, we would set what each row would be, and then we would add each row to the user list. And when we have that, we have essentially a grand user list that is essentially a list in the form of the user's DTO. I should have led with the fact that the return value of this function is a list that is in the format of a user's DTO. DTO standing for data transfer object, and DAO stands for data access. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What else is there to show? The controllers. So for the controllers, we would have had essentially 3 controllers, especially for the users. So I can show you users controller, the update user controller, as well as the new user controller. Sorry, new user controller. So we've been using a lot of MFX packages. So we've been using date pickers, we've been using text fields, and all that stuff. But everything, most of the application was done using a lot of native JAVAFX tools. Okay, so here's an instance where we have our create user. So we would essentially, whenever a user enters data, it goes into these fields, and we would essentially grab them using the getText method. And when it's grabbed, it's then thrown into the user insert method, which we would have defined in the user's model. And then it runs it, and it gives back any sort of feedback necessary. So we'll tell you if the user was created successfully, if it was not. And all of this is done through clicking the button. So if we were to open up the create user fxml, sorry, not the create user fxml, we'll be opening up new user fxml. We would see that the create button itself, in the code, we would have set it to have an on mouse clicked create user method. So whenever this button is clicked by a mouse, it runs this method, which is our create user method, which essentially creates the user. And then we have our go back method, which essentially returns us back to our home page. Yes, I think that's about everything. Every other control, every other method follows the same format. So